All right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time live or on YouTube, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, all November long, we focused on conservation. We went all across the globe to East Africa, the Arctic, Indonesia, and more. We've continued that trend through December. We've got a whole bunch of great polar bear, big cat presentations this week and coming up. But today we're doing a little bit of something different, and we're going to learn about birds, specifically curlews. So we're joined by Heather Hayes. She is the Community Science Coordinator for Boise's Intermountain Bird Observatory. We've done all sorts of amazing programs with them over the last 2 years, tagging songbirds, tagging rappers. But I always love when we get a chance to hear about this really, really unique and beautiful and lovely animal with the curlew. So without further ado, Heather, thank you so much for joining us today, and take us away.
All right. So is my screen up okay for everyone?
You are all set and good to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me into your homes and your classrooms today to talk about a bird that I'm very passionate about. But first, again, my name is Heather Hayes, and I work for a research group called the Intermountain Bird Observatory. And so our main focus is bird research and conservation. And so one of the birds I want to discuss with you today is a bird that's in a lot of trouble in our area. It's called the long-billed curlew, and its populations are in decline right now in our localized area. And so we have been studying this bird since 2009, trying to figure out what's behind its decline. And so I typically like to show you a skull of a long-billed curlew. So Jesse, to stop screen share again, I just hit escape.
You don't need to stop screen share. I can bring it up, or people see you and the bird right now.
Oh, you can see me now. Okay, great. And so hopefully you can get a good shot of that skull. And so the skull is this little golf ball size here. It's got this really massively long bill. And so I just like to show people this right off the bat, just so you know that this bill is very important for the survival of the curlew because its main function is for eating. And so if you can imagine this bill going really deep down in the soil and pulling up little insects, or if they're on their wintering grounds in California and Mexico, they might pull up little sand crabs from the beach, or little fish that float up, or little ghost shrimp. And so I like to make that known because people look at that bill sometimes and think that the bird might attack them. But the bird is not going to use its bill for any form of defense because if it breaks, which it can happen very easily, hopefully you can see that, it's very fragile and the bird won't be able to eat. And so they don't have talons like a raptor for defense either. But we're going to get into what they actually do use to ward off predators here in a minute. So let me introduce you guys to a long-billed curlew. So it's a really strange looking bird, right? It's got this really long neck. It's got super long legs and that wicked long bill. And so it kind of looks like it should be out on the shore, right? And they actually are, like I said, they overwinter in California and Mexico. And sometimes you'll find them out in the beach areas on the coast. And they use that bill to do a lot of probing. And they're considered North America's largest shorebird. And so these guys will nest up through the Intermountain West areas in the western United States. And so up through Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and all the way up into Canada. And so that's where they breed. And then they're a migratory species, which means they take that long journey south, right? And so they will hang out in California and Mexico for the winter. So they come up and utilize our grassland habitats through the Intermountain West because these low grasslands provide the perfect resource for nesting because these guys actually nest on the ground, believe it or not. And so the short grassland habitat allows them a 360-degree view all around them to be watchful for predators. And so they also work really well on ranches where there's a lot of cattle. So the cattle keep the grass really low in the beginning of the season. And then what happens is as the cattle move on, the grass starts to grow. And when the chicks hatch, they'll have places to hide in that taller grass. So they have a really great relationship on ranch lands. And that beak of theirs can grow up to a whopping 8.5 inches long. And if you guys have ever held a chicken or a duck before, that's about what it's like to hold a curlew. So they only weigh about 1 to 2 pounds. So when you see curlews, you'll sometimes see different sizes of them like this. And this is a picture of a male and a female. And when there's a difference in size between the males and the females, we call that sexual dimorphism. So it's just a big fancy science word to say, hey, there's one that's bigger and one that's smaller. And so in this picture, the female in the back is the bigger one. And then the smaller one in the front is going to be your male. And so this is a really cool video that just came to us from California, where somebody actually spotted one of our tracked birds that we're going to talk about a little later. So this is just a great example of how they use that really long bill to probe down in the dirt or in the sand or mud flats to pull up little crustaceans and insects. So kind of cool to see that bill in action. And so remember, I said that they nested on the ground, and it's important to remember that any ground-dwelling species needs to be a master at blending into the environment, and we call that camouflage. And so with ground nesting birds like the long-billed curlew, it's not just the adults that need to be camouflaged, right? So when the chicks or when the eggs are laid and when the chicks are hatched, they need to be really camouflaged as well. So all of the life stages of the curlew need to blend in really well to hide from predators. In fact, you can see in the picture up in the upper left-hand corner here, the eggs just kind of blend right into the dirt and the ground and look like little rocks. And then the birds themselves kind of look like a clump of dirt. And then they'll actually get really low to the ground. Like this bird is sitting up really high on the nest. But as you approach that nest or a predator approaches that nest, they can sit really tight to that nest. And so one of the problems that curlews are up against is called anthropomorphic disturbances. So basically disturbances that humans are doing, right? And so out here in the West, we have a big expanse of public lands where you can do all sorts of fun things. You can ride your motorcycles, you can ride your horses, you can go target shooting. And so as you can imagine, where all these curlews are nesting, those kind of disturbances can create quite a problem for their population. And then you don't want to forget about predators as well, right? And so when a predator gets too close to a curlew nest, they give off a shrieking alarm call. And remember in the beginning when I said they don't use their bill for any form of defense and they don't have talons like a raptor, what they do have is a blood-curdling scream. And so when we have to approach a nest for our research, the parents usually see us coming, right? And so once we get too close for their comfort, they're going to start dive bombing us and letting us know that we're too close. And so I'm going to play you what that sounds like right now. So it's really loud and screamy. And what you're listening to now is just one curlew. So if you can imagine having a bunch of other curlews over your head doing that, it kind of makes your heart leap out of your chest. And that's what the curlews are hoping for. So when the first curlew sets off that alarm bell, it alerts all the other nesting curlews in the area, and they all come to help either chase off the coyote or the badger or maybe even the human. And so here's just to show you what the chickies look like when they're all dried off. They're super cute. And you can see in the right-hand photo over here how camouflaged it is in these grasses. And that really helps them out when the predators are around. So if the parents are up in the air screaming and dive bombing, which we call mobbing, those chicks know to hide in the grass really quick. And then I have a fun little video just to show you what it looks like when they're up on their long legs. And it doesn't take them long to get to this stage. When they hatch, within about an hour or two, they'll be dried off and already starting to walk around outside of the nest. And so a cool part of our program is the satellite tracking part of the program. And we really hope you guys will want to be a part of this. And so what we do is we will capture a long-billed curlew and we'll band it and also put a transmitter on it so we can learn more about its migration. And so it takes a lot of work to go through the whole process of finding a nest, safely capturing the curlew, and then going through the processing of checking its weight and all the different data measurements we need to record. And so up in the left-hand picture here, our research director, Jay, has safely extracted a female long-billed curlew. And the reason why I know that it's a female, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is the female has a much longer bill than the male does. So remember how the females in general were bigger than the males? Well, the length of their bill is longer as well. And so the females will sit on the nest all day long, and then they get relieved by the males at night. So the males will incubate the eggs all night long. And so they do this switching on and off in the evenings and in the mornings. And so since this is during the day, that's another indicator that this is a female curlew. So over on the right-hand side, you can see where they start to do the processing. And what they're doing right here is they're putting a band on the bird's leg. And you'll notice it's got a little tiny handkerchief covering its face. And that actually helps the bird be calm and not be stressed because it's in a very unusual situation, right? So we want to make sure that the bird feels very safe and very calm. So after we go through the banding process, it's time to attach the transmitter. So this transmitter is super lightweight and it's solar powered. So you guys can see those two little solar windows right here on the unit. So the sun will charge up some little tiny batteries inside the unit. And so that is going to send a signal to a satellite, which then sends a satellite an image back down, or a transmission ping down to your computer. And so that's helping us piece together their migration. So we take our time when we put these transmitters on, but because we want that bird to feel secure having that on it, right? And so we take a lot of time to make sure that the bird is comfortable. And what's really unique is we have figured out a way that the curlews communicate with us if that transmitter doesn't feel quite right on its back. And so what we'll do is we'll put the transmitter on, and then we put the bird inside of a little camping tent, and we release it inside the tent. And it's either going to run around like a chicken, or it's going to sit right down. So I'm going to give you guys a second to think about that. What would you do if you were uncomfortable with something on you? Would you run around like crazy? Or do you think you would sit down and wait for somebody to make you feel better? Well, the curlews sit right down. And so that's a great indication that something doesn't feel quite right with the attachment of that transmitter. So what we'll do is take the bird out of the tent, and we'll start to readjust that unit, and then we'll put the bird back in the tent. And when we do it the second time, this is what we're hoping to see. So she is feeling really good, and she's not concerned about the transmitter on her back, and she's not concerned about the identifying bands on her legs. All she can really think about right now is getting back to those eggs as fast as possible. And so as soon as we see the birds running around the tent like that, we know they're good to be released. And so this is a really cool map that you guys will be able to access through this link. And what you can do is get on your computer at any time of day, because the curlew transmitters are sending pings throughout the day. And you can actually pick a curlew and watch to see where it's going. And so when the map comes up, it'll be this gray color, but you can change it. There's different base layers, and you'll see what I mean. There's some icons on there, and you can kind of make it look like a real map with roads and cities and towns. Excuse me. And so when you scroll your cursor over one of these colored dots, you will see the bird's name and when it was last seen transmitted. And so this bird, this image is actually from a few years ago, but it was just used as an example. It was seen on Wednesday, February 21st, and it'll give you the year and the time. And so then if you want to learn more about these birds, you can go to our website and look for tracking curlews, and you can learn about the story of each bird, which is kind of cool. And so this is kind of just like your typical Google map, which I'm sure a lot of you are starting to learn to use. And so you can zoom in on a particular dot. And so this cluster of birds right here, I zoomed in on right here, and you can see their tracks where they're going day after day. And it's really fun because you can learn if they're going to the water. You can learn if they're going into agricultural fields. So you can learn a lot about where they're going throughout their day on their migration or on their wintering grounds. And this has really been piecing a lot of mysteries together for us. So we're learning where our breeding curlews from Idaho actually wind up for the winter. And we've had lots of cool surprises. One of our birds that we tracked and transmitted from the most northern point goes all the way down the furthest migration route into Mexico, into central Mexico here. And then this year, we learned that two birds from our new study sites that are actually up in the mountains of Idaho are our first birds to actually go all the way to the coast of California. So in the past, all of our birds seem to have stopped in this beautiful big Central Valley stretch of California. And that's where a lot of agriculture goes on. And as you can imagine, curlews really thrive in some agricultural areas because there's a lot of insect resources, right? And so it was really exciting to finally have some of our study birds go all the way to the coast, because we already knew there was all sorts of curlews that live on the coast, but we were just wondering why there were none in our study population. And so that was a really cool find for us this year. And it's kind of neat because now that they're in an area where there's a lot of people, because a lot of people go to the beach and they like to bird on the beach, they're sending us pictures of our birds, Dozer and Neil, almost weekly, which is super exciting to now have more people connected in this migratory research and kind of be able to keep an eye on our birds and get to see them on their wintering grounds live. And so you can see that they made it safely. They have their little backpack transmitters hidden underneath their feathers a little bit. And there's the antenna. And then they're identifying leg bands that each bird that we put a band on has a unique number. It's kind of like your social security number. No one else is ever going to have that number. So it's the same for birds too. So another thing that is very helpful about putting transmitters on the birds is it's helping us identify some of the driving forces behind their decline. And so in the beginning, before we started putting transmitters on the birds, we would find bodies of the birds that look like they got eaten by a predator. I don't know if you guys can tell, like there's a wing over here on this bird, there's the bill and the head. So it's all torn apart, like perhaps a coyote got it, or maybe a badger got it. And we developed a really great relationship with the Idaho Department of Fish and Game's Wildlife Health Laboratory. So basically, this is a really cool place that it's their job to try to figure out what killed an animal. And so it's kind of like a CSI for wildlife. And so they offered to our group to collect any bird carcasses we found out in the field, and they would x-ray them for us. And so this is one of the first birds that we had put a transmitter on. And then just a few short days later, we found the bird like this. So we were pretty disappointed. And so we collected all the parts and we took it into the Health Wildlife Lab, and they were able to identify through x-rays that the bird had actually been shot. And so I don't know if you guys know this or not, but metal shows up really, really bright white on an X-ray. And so if you're not familiar with looking at X-rays, you can see here that these are the bones, that light blue and light purpley color. And then right down here, you see all this really bright white stuff. And so that is metal. And so learning that the birds were getting shot was kind of a game changer, because we were thinking that predators were the biggest problem, right? Because we kept finding all these birds in pieces out in the field. And so we weren't sure how we were going to be able to control predators, or if we even could control predators. So when we started to see that they were actually getting shot and left out in the field, and scavengers were then getting to the body, we knew we had to start kind of educating the public that it's illegal to shoot these birds because it's a migratory species. So you guys are probably familiar with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And that act basically states that it's illegal to shoot or hunt or possess any body parts or nests or even feathers of migratory bird species. And so we've been putting a lot of effort into our outreach, which means just getting out into the public and teaching people about migratory species. And so between 2013, when we started putting transmitters on the birds, to 2018, almost half of our transmitted birds had been poached or illegally shot in our localized area on the public lands in southwest Idaho. And so when you have a species in a decline, like the curlew, which in our localized area is currently in a 95% decline in a period of about 40 years, a population can't continually sustain losses like this 7 of 16 birds that were illegally shot. And so we knew we really had to put forth as much effort as we could into education. And so this is one of the things we're doing. We are taking this information into hunter's ed classes and into adult public forums to talk about knowing your target and knowing what you're allowed to shoot and what you're not allowed to shoot. And we just really go over what it's like to be an ethical hunter, and what to do if you see someone doing something illegal. You can call a group called Citizens Against Poaching here in Idaho. So education and awareness we're hoping really been helping the curlews. In the past 3 years now, I believe, we have not found any of our transmitted birds shot. So we're hoping that this awareness campaign is doing a lot of good. And we're hoping by reaching out to you guys and taking you on this little virtual field trip and educating you about a bird that maybe you've never heard of, that you can now kind of help spread the word about this cool bird. And there's a lot of cool resources online if you want to learn more about curlews. And of course, YouTube is a great resource. And you can see all sorts of videos of them foraging and eating, and videos of other research that we've done in other states. And then, of course, you can always reach out to us if you have any questions. So I will open it up now for any questions. And if anybody is interested in emailing or following us on any social media, you can reach us on Facebook, Twitter, and also on Instagram. And we just do a lot of fun postings on a lot of the cool birds that we trap at our banding stations and the research we do in the summer. So I appreciate you guys asking me along today. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Heather. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, take a few seconds to do that. Great to have all those resources and ways to keep the learning going and to reach out to you directly. Ms. Dillon, I'm going to come to you guys in just a second for some questions, but I want to take some from that we got in via email over the last little bit. So again, thanks for the awesome presentation.
Yeah, so 1 second, Jesse, could you help me come back to where I can see everybody?
Yeah, take your time. So just once you're in that screen where you are,
yep,
you should be able to minimize that and come back.
Minimize. That's right. Thank you.
Perfect. There you go. Welcome back. Our first question is about you personally. How did you get involved in this? Like, what's the desire to study birds? If you're fascinated with them, what led to this cool career?
Yeah. Well, I graduated from Kent State University, which is a college in Ohio, with a conservation biology degree. And even though most of my work I did with birds was volunteer work, I just ended up working with insects as a professional job to start. And then I went to fish. And then I was just kind of brought back around full circle to my volunteer work with birds and got the opportunity to volunteer with the Intermountain Bird Observatory, which is the group I'm with now. And I just haven't looked back. It's been a fun experience. Birds connect people in great ways, especially now when everybody's kind of at home, kind of quarantining and being safe. You can still bird from your windows. And you can be online learning about the birds you're seeing outside your windows and sharing with other people. And I think I really like that. I love the way birds connect people, not just in communities, but across the globe. And that's what makes it so fun for me and keeps me passionate about them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Farmington, Missouri. Ms. Dillon's class. If you guys have a question for us, just demute your mic and then come on in. Hey, Ms. Dillon's group.
Hey.
Hey. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, Trent has a question. How big do the eggs get?
That's a great question. And I actually have one here to show you guys. It's kind of breaking a little bit, but it'll show you the size compared to my hand, I guess. Here, let me see if I can hold it like this. So it's a little bit bigger than a hen's egg. I guess I'll just hold it like that. And this egg was from one of our study sites in the desert area. And so you can tell that it's got this basically desert colors, right? This dark brown spots with a little bit of brown background. And then some of our study sites in more like wetland meadow areas, the eggs will be more of a greenish blue color to blend in with the grasses and the colors of the flowers out in the meadows. So it's really cool that they have this ability to have this camouflage that matches their exact environment that they're nesting in. Great question.
Great question, guys. All right, I'll take another one via email, and then I'll go back to you, Ms. Dillon's class. So if a kid wanted to grow up to become a research scientist like you talked a little bit about your educational journey and all these amazing different things. Is there something you'd recommend? Is there something that people need to have to end up in a career like yours?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So my best piece of advice is try to get involved in volunteering. And it can be something that's maybe, something as little as, offering to help for an event of something you're interested in. So I'll just use the Intermountain Bird Observatory as an example, because we'll have events sometimes in the summer. We need help with talking to people about birds, or maybe even helping park their cars, or a lot of times we ask for volunteers to help us with data collection. So you can come up to one of our banding stations, and as the scientists have the birds in their hands, they'll read to you numbers that you'll write down. So there's all sorts of different ways to get involved. And what I always tell people too is it's kind of interesting, because you might pick something you really feel like you're passionate about, and you might do a job shadow or try to get a volunteering position and do it for a little while and realize, you know what, it really wasn't what you thought it was. And so volunteering is a great way to help navigate your future career path. And when you can continually show up and show your mentors that, you're dedicated, you're passionate, you're willing to put in the time, that really gets you noticed. So like I said, my biggest piece of advice is to volunteer as much as possible, because that helps you network with other people too. And that's kind of what got me, that is what got me to where I am today. So.
Very cool. It's so fascinating hearing from so many speakers in all the disciplines, how volunteering and sort of that follow your passion, do those sort of things, find as many opportunities as you can to learn is something that really unites all of our speakers, no matter what discipline they're in. So I'm always glad we get that message across. All right, back to Ms. Dillon's class. Come on back up, guys. Go for it.
Dakota, you want to ask it?
How long do they live for?
Yeah.
Like, how many years do they live?
That's a question we get all the time. So from a research standpoint, we don't really know how old the curlews are. We know they're, adult and they're, nesting and having chicks, but we can only tell how old they are from like, not how old they are, but how many years they are for how long they have their transmitters on. But I have seen online, like in captivity, I think there was a bird that was maybe 18 years old. But in the wild, it's really hard to tell because if you think about a migratory species that has this huge long journey to take twice a year, there's a lot of dangers they have on their migration route, whether it's with predators or, bad windstorms or whatever could keep them from making it all the way on their journey. So it's really hard to tell in the wild. Unless, like I said, you can kind of gauge by getting the transmitters and the bands on the legs to know the date that you banded it and then how many years it survived after that. So sorry, I don't have a definitive answer for you.
That's quite all right. A lot of scientists like that. I'm going to take one more question online, come back to Ms. Dillons for one more, and we'll wrap up from there. So the other question is other research groups. So you talk about tracking them across this huge migratory journey. Are there other universities or other groups that you guys partner with to help, track them on this whole run and keep you guys apprised of what they're doing in other parts of the world?
Yeah, so we're a very small group that we're a nonprofit group. That works, it's like a research unit of Boise State University. And so we couldn't do what we do without partnerships and collaborations. So we work with groups, some of which you guys have probably heard of, like the Nature Conservancy. Here in Idaho, we have the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. We also have another government agency called the Bureau of Land Management, which is shortened to BLM out here. And then we also work with a lot of other what you call NGOs or non-government agencies. So we have a bunch of groups like a Golden Eagle Audubon Society. And so we have like connections also on the wintering grounds too, like that will, if there's a transmitted bird that maybe the dot stops moving on the map, and we need a biologist to go out and help track down that bird to see if it's okay. We have biologists down there that we can call up. So we have this really great broad network that can help us with curlews. And then we also have the public help. Like I said, we're getting these great pictures out of California from our tracked birds on the beach. And we also have volunteers that help kind of behind the scenes where they can actually keep tabs on the curlews through like a data set of numbers. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but they're behind the scenes checking on the curlews like once a week to make sure their transmitters are still working. So it's a huge network of people from government to other nonprofits to the public. And that's what helps this project remain so successful.
Very, very cool, Heather. Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Dillons class, wrap us up. If you guys have one more question, come on in.
Yeah, we have one more question. Michael would like to ask his, and then we want to know if I can get a selfie real quick.
Okay,
sure.
Get a selfie.
I love it. Only if you'll send it to me.
Okay.
Awesome. What's the question, guys?
How fast do they fly?
How fast are they flying, Heather?
That's another good question. Let me pose it this way. This is the one that I know. So what is your guess for one of our Idaho curlews to make it to their wintering grounds in California?
Okay. From Idaho.
What would be your guess?
How long do you think it takes them to fly from Idaho to California?
Probably like a good, maybe a few days or so. Like
A few days. I would guess that too.
Depends on how fast they fly. Like maybe.
Exactly. So we had tracked one of our curlews from Idaho to California, and I think it was in about 12 hours.
What?
Yeah, I know, right? So I think there's probably, and you got to think about what the factors are. Are they flying into the wind? Are they flying against the wind? How many storms are they up against? Which is actually really cool. So when you guys get on that transmitter map, and let's just say during their migration, so the birds come back from California and Mexico typically around the end of March. So my suggestion is, get familiar with the map and be ready in March to start watching it every day. And you're going to start to see a line when the birds start to migrate. So each dot is going to have a line that you'll see start coming back up to all of our study sites. And so if it looks like one of the birds hasn't moved in a few days and it's only halfway through its migration route, what are some of the things you might start thinking about? Like, why is that bird sitting there? Do you guys have any guesses?
I do.
What's your guess?
Either it got poached or an animal killed it, or you never know. Like
What? Yeah, you're exactly right. And also, what if a big storm comes in? What do you think the birds are going to do?
Huddle down.
Yeah, they're going to hunker down and wait for that storm to pass. So sometimes they can get in front of a storm system, but if they, if it just kind of gets away from them and they think it's safer to land, that they're going to land and hunker down and hopefully find some good resources. And so you guys could go to a weather map and see, hey, is there a storm? Is that why this curlew is still sitting there? So it's kind of neat to be able to, test your hypotheses of why that bird is still there. And one thing I want to mention before we go to is that part of this migration research, what's so important about it is now that we know the routes that these birds are using and where they're going, from a conservation standpoint, we can see where they're stopping over, when they need to take a rest, what kind of resources do they have? And when you have a population like the curlews that are in a decline, this is going to help you see if they're having trouble. Maybe there's a big stopover point that used to have a lot of water and now they've drained the wetlands that they use or whatever. So we can use that information to help mitigate the problems that they might be having on their migration route.
Yeah, this is great stuff, guys. Ms. Dillon's class, what I'm going to do is take a question from a group that just popped in on YouTube, and then I'll end the broadcast, but we'll still be around. You can take that selfie the moment we're done going live, okay? So Mr. Parker's class, Cameron and Mr. Parker's class just wanted to know how much they eat in a day, Heather.
Oh, wow. I couldn't tell you, but what I can tell you is that two neat things. So here in Idaho, like on the public lands, it's considered like high desert area. So there's not a lot of water. The vegetation is pretty drought resistant. And so they can't always get their beak down into the ground very easily when it's hard, right? And so we have a lot of vegetation that sometimes grows taller. It's called tumble mustard, has all these beautiful little yellow flowers on it. And so they'll glean insects off of the vegetation. And then a little bit later, like end of June, I'd say, there's like a huge grasshopper hatch out. And so there are grasshoppers everywhere. And so the curlews just walk. I'll use their beak here as an example. They'll just walk kind of quickly and they glean the insects off the plants like this, just super fast. And so since there's not a lot of water in this high desert area, these guys get a lot of their water from the insects they eat, because that's another question we get a lot. If this is high desert and there's, only canals and stuff that they have to fly to get water, how well do they do? So they do get a lot of their water from the insects that they eat.
Great questions, guys. This has been so much fun. What I'm going to do now, Heather, again, is bring up just really quickly. You had all those great resources at the end of your talk already. But if you want to learn more about Boise State and the Curlews program, check out this link on the bottom of the page. And you can also check out the Intermountain Bird Observatory generally on Instagram with some really astonishingly beautiful pictures here below. So do check those out. Sort of unwieldy, and hopefully you can copy those or just type them into Google. It'll all work. What I want to do now is, so Ms. Dillon, I promise you will get a selfie. I'm just going to bring you guys in to say a quick thank you and goodbye, end the broadcast from there, and then we'll do that selfie. So thank you guys so much in Ms. Dillon's class for being here. Thanks, Heather, for a great talk. Have